All right, thanks, Brent. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Got the coveted after lunch slot, so hopefully the content we have up here will keep you all awake and engaged. I'm super excited to be moderating this panel. This is my first time at EWTS, my company's first time at EWTS, and we're really in a position of learning and trying to understand this industry, so I'm excited to hear everything the panelists have to say today. So as Brent mentioned, I'm here from Bose Corporation, and you're probably asking yourselves a few questions. Why is Bose here at EWTS, and are they the people who have been making all that booming noise throughout the exhibition hall? So the answer to the second thing is yes, that has been us, but in truth you have to make a whole lot of noise to prove to the world you can cancel a whole lot of noise. And so hopefully we've been doing that today, and hopefully you've had a chance to stop by. The second question is, so I'm part of Bose Labs, which is a small incubation team at Bose, and we've been trying to figure out what we can do with our technology to help the industrial worker. So everything from high noise voice pickup to hearing protection, sound management, to one of our new open ear audio platform, which is great for having a personal and immersive audio experience while still maintaining situational awareness. And then also our unique approach to AR, which unlike most of the folks here at the conference, instead of putting visual information and overlaying that on top of the world, we overlay audio information. We think there's a huge opportunity here to be enable your workers to be more productive and have more accessible and a higher deployment rate because of that unique take on the technology. So this panel here, we have a really lofty goal of talking about what technologies sort of in conjunction to AR and VR that are merging and enabling will help accelerate adoption and bring us closer to that world of a fully connected workforce. So there's really two elements to that, right? There's what are these enabling and augmenting technologies, and the other piece is what is that fully connected workforce? What does that really even mean? Something we shouldn't kind of take for granted that we all understand what everyone is talking about when they say that. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists. I'll stop talking now. And I'd like each of them to introduce themselves, the company that they represent, and then what key emerging and enabling technologies they are most focused on right now and why.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Scott Aldridge with CDM Smith, a household name like Boeing, Exxon, Pfizer, and United. Yeah. So I run the Disruptive Innovations Group and primarily focused on all of XR with a focus on mixed reality and working to combine different technologies like mixed reality with our use of small unmanned drones, our use of cognitive services, machine learning, and who knows where it's going to go. But really excited to talk with you guys here in this format and looking forward to what the rest of the panel has to say.
I'm Dr. Brian Laughlin, Boeing Company, IT architect and technical fellow. We do a lot of different, pretty much runs the gamut in terms of all the emerging technology. We do AR, VR, XR, IR, exoskeletons, IoT, big data, cloud, IA, or AI. I mean, it goes on and on. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. Glad to be here with you.
Eric Johnston, ExxonMobil, technology architect for Connected Worker. So looking at wearables and augmented reality, primarily for our industrial workforce, so the people that are in refineries, offshore platforms, pipelines, those types of areas, so non-office workers. We're looking at a wide gamut of technologies as well. I would say some of the few key ones are obviously, we're on connected workforce, so wearable technology for those workers. We've also got IoT and AI. We've got drones. I mean, all of those things trying to come together, I think is what I'm excited to talk to you guys about today.
Good afternoon, Nathan Yorgey, Manufacturing Innovative Technologies for Pfizer. So the focus of our group is really on manufacturing and within the four walls of the plant. I think I share the same types of technologies with most of the folks up here: drones, 3D printing, AR, VR, biometrics, and again, it's kind of the fusion of all of that with the solution data or the core solutions that Pfizer has, so that as we're manufacturing, we're doing that in a seamless way and connecting our workers with the data when they need it to do the job that they have to do, whatever it may be.
I'm Peggy Wu, Principal Research Scientist at United Technologies Research Center. We are actually celebrating our 90th anniversary this year at the Research Center. We're interested in all of those technologies and one very old technology, the human. So in addition to XR, MR, all of the above, we're looking at physiological measures of the human to understand, their workload. We're looking at their behaviors and trying to figure out, whether we can learn from their behaviors to feed AI or whether we can learn from their behaviors to, more directly feed humans.
Great, thank you all so much. So as I mentioned, the second part of this panel, or kind of the second part of the question, is all of this so that we can fully realize that fully connected workforce. And so I would like the panelists to kind of share with the audience what that vision means for them and their company, because I think it probably differs quite a bit by industry and by function.
So I can kick it off here. So ExxonMobil, we have this idea of autonomous operations that we want to get to. But if you look at something like a refinery, it's never truly going to be fully autonomous, right? You're never going to have a refinery. It's just no people. So what does that look like when you have a connected workforce mixed with autonomous operations? To me, that's a facility that's running itself, making kind of its own little decisions using machine learning and advanced AI, where it's tweaking the feed lines and the percentages of stuff and the valve positions. But then the things that it can't do, it's sending that out to the workforce, right? And the workforce kind of becomes the feet of the plant, right? To if I can't turn this valve because it requires physical presence, the system kicks off a work order to that worker that, the AI, tells them where to go, the AR is showing them kind of the path to get there, and they've got, a heads-up display of exactly how to do it. So it kind of flips where the facility is in charge, but the humans are still running it.
And for us, I think it's different, different visions of the connected workforce. In our case, we do want potentially, in the future, a dark manufacturing facility, right, where it's completely automated. And you might have, people monitoring from the outside. So that might be for, say, Pratt & Whitney making jet engines in a dark manufacturing facility. But then we also have some of our other users, which are the astronauts on the ISS, for example, or going back to the moon, where we do want the people there. So then it becomes about getting the right information to the right people at the right time, and also making sure that they're not overloaded. So we want 5G. We want, high definition everything in front of their eyes, but that's also overlaid on top of everything else that they need to do. So we need to consider, the additional information, whatever situation they're in now, and then making sure that we're not overloading them.
So at Pfizer, the vision really is one around the human being at the center of that. So the goal here is we're making medicines for patients, but the humans need to create the medicine. So I don't know we'll ever get, there's part of our operation where we will drive to autonomy and move away from having people do the work because less human interaction means higher quality products. But in pharmaceutical manufacturing, you're never going to truly get away from that. So it's really around enabling role-based views. So as opposed to having all of this information and having the individuals declutter that for themselves, it's around a role-based view where if I'm a shift supervisor or if I'm a maintenance technician, when I log into my day and I turn on the systems that matter to me, first and foremost, I'm going into one system with data insights at the ready so that it's telling me what do I need to do, what do I need to act on, what things may I need to predictively change or fix. And so as opposed to logging into 12 different core solutions to then glean all that information, it's expose it by logging into one dashboard, giving them what they need to then go and do what they need to do. And then the technologies like drones or AR, VR, or 3D printing or whatever else are just consumption engines or agents to allow them to do the work that they need to do.
So at Boeing, in a nutshell, we want to provide the best products that we can in the safest way and at the most appropriate cost. I don't know of a company that has a farther reach than Boeing. We go from the depths of the ocean to the farthest, expanses of space. So it includes a lot of different things, including, cybersecurity, airplanes, a lot of things that you guys don't hear about. Actually, we do a lot of other work that we can't even discuss. But relative to the human, I appreciate Peggy's perspective on that. Human in the loop, in a nutshell, I'm trying to basically produce noise abatement. I want to turn down the signal, or turn up the signal rather, and turn down all the noise in the environment so that our folks can absolutely and utterly focus on the task at hand and what they're trying to do. Point of use and time need information is a really critical element of what we do to try to assure quality and safety. And so a really big thing that we're starting to get more and more towards, it's funny because you hear AR, XR, all these different emerging technologies. And as amazing as these things are unto themselves, the real power, we haven't seen anything yet. Like the real power in this stuff is going to be when we start to integrate these into a systems type approach with a focus on getting things done. Nobody buys any of these technologies because they're wonderful technologies. They buy them because they want to accomplish something in the same way that whoever bought a drill wanted a drill, they needed a hole. And so I think it's really critical that we understand that and that we're very focused and make sure that we understand, kind of what our end users need, what they're trying to accomplish, work out the best way to do that, and then think about what kind of technologies will control, accelerate, and distribute that information.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but they have some fantastic visions. CDM Smith, we're a 5,000-person private engineering firm. We build infrastructure, and I will say that I'd love to have those ambitions, but the industries that we serve, construction and those environments, we're not going to get there in the next few years, maybe not even 5 to 10 years. But what we are trying to do is disrupt on a small scale. So if you think of a disruption scale from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're probably addressing things that are at like 2, things you can extend what you're doing now and get more data to that frontline worker so they can make better decisions, provide them the tools that they need. Provide them tools, because a lot of the frontline workers don't have those tools at all, no computers, anything. So I think eventually the industries we serve will get to the level of these guys, but we're going to take our lead from them.
And I think it's nice to have kind of that guiding vision. So a lot of the stuff that, even that I talked about, that's stuff that's really far out, right? That's stuff that's not coming tomorrow. But I think if you have that vision, you can get everybody kind of wrapped around that and get everybody marching towards that. And so I really believe that the vision is important when you're undertaking something like this, to get everybody on the same page and understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish. If you're just trying to do little piecemeal technology, a lot of times people don't see the grander vision. So I think you got to pull it together for them. You got to show why drones hooked into mixed reality is an important thing versus just the drone itself. The drone itself is cool and it provides some value, but if you can tie in those other things, it's even better.
Sure, and of course a vision is important when you're met with challenges along the way. And so actually my next question is for both Nathan and Eric. So you both come from very different industries, oil and gas and pharmaceuticals, and the specifics of the environment of your industries, I imagine, poses unique challenges to bringing emerging technology into your workforce. And so can you talk a little bit about those challenges and how you deal with them on a daily basis, overcome them?
Sure, I can go first. So, as you would imagine with pharmaceuticals, you've got a Food and Drug Administration that puts, and reasonably so, lots of regulations upon you to release drugs that are going to go into that humans are going to ingest in some form. So all of those requirements are valid and need to be met, and yet the pushback from internal quality is reduce risk at all level, because we want to produce these drugs compliantly, but yet we don't want to add additional risk into the environment. So the complexity is when you bring in these new and innovative technologies, they're solving a problem which reduces the risk, but yet at the same time, they inherently bring additional risk into the environment. And so internally, that's one of the biggest challenges we face, is trying to figure out how do we extract the value out of the technology to deliver the reduced risk to produce medicines to patients faster, quicker, more compliant, and more safely. And then you have, so that's the one aspect, which is its own sphere. Equally, on the other sphere, you have all the cybersecurity concerns, which we all have to deal with in the age in which we live. And so now you're bringing in these technologies, many of which are existing on a Wi-Fi network, which you're trying to bring information to people that are either in far-flung places of your plant or that are around the world that need to collaborate together to be able to produce a drug or be part of that process. And so how do you find that balance of doing enough to be able to give people the access they need to do what they need to do, but yet at the same time ensuring that the corporate network, confidential secrets, all the different things that matter from a cybersecurity standpoint, and the ability to say our operations are not going to be hamstrung by somebody bringing a wearable into our environment that puts a virus into the network, and then we're shut down and we can't do the mission of which we're supposed to do. So those two things are probably the biggest. And then kind of in the middle is, again, because we're operating with humans, the whole human factor of buying into this is really going to add value to what I do. And so that's where, again, the challenge of the user experience is so key. Finding what user experience is going to matter to that individual so that then we don't have the compliance piece over here and the cybersecurity piece kind of pulling apart the atom to where you're no longer being able to do what you need to do. So if that human is in the center saying, this does a need, it meets a need for me, those two kind of competing priorities that are on opposite sides of the poles don't pull apart the equation, they actually pull it together.
So many challenges. Where to begin without causing stress to myself here? So the ones Nathan mentioned are obviously key for us as well. You can imagine a name like ExxonMobil is a really big target for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And so cybersecurity is obviously a really big challenge that we have to take into account when we're looking at solutions. I mean, just something as simple as saying it's going to be in the cloud draws a lot of red flags, right? And so there's a lot of process you have to go through, and I think it's just understanding that up front and knowing that you've got a lot of time for that is a really big challenge. If you look at the places that we operate as well, it's very volatile environments, right? Very can be explosive type of elements that are in there. And so safety is a #1 priority for us at our company, right? We don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize or cause somebody to be in danger, possibly get hurt, or worse. And so when you're bringing something in, we have to follow a lot of regulations around just what can they see, right? Are we blocking their vision and going to cause them to, trip, for example? Hearing protection. So this, Ilissa and I've had these conversations with Bose here. We have very strict requirements on how many decibels somebody can be exposed to in a day, and they're stricter than what OSHA requires, right? And so they tend to be ExxonMobil specific challenges that we've put in place because we feel like the environment requires that. So it's understanding those up front so that you don't have those surprises later on. Intrinsically safe is one I've mentioned on this stage before. And that's really the ability for a device to cause a spark if it encounters a gas vapor. And that's something that's very likely to happen in our environment. So you can think, oh, well, are there just gas vapors floating around? There might be, right? And you don't want to have that one device that causes that spark. It's the reason that you can't just take, a Google Pixel phone right into a refinery because it's not certified to be there, right? So you have to be very careful about the things that you introduce. Meanwhile, on the front end, you're trying to test new technology, right? You're trying to bring in IoT sensors that may not be this way. And that's where we try and find those areas that don't require the intrinsically safe, like don't go after the really hard parts. Find a chemical plant that maybe doesn't have, the requirement for intrinsically safe, or find a pilot plant where they test out things and, test there first to try and understand the value and be able to show people what it is before you try and take it into the really difficult place. So quite a bit, and I would say probably my #1 challenge that I get into with these areas is connectivity. So we're doing a lot right now trying to deploy Wi-Fi, some cellular type of stuff. I know 5G is going to save the world if you listen to this. For me, 5G actually makes my life harder, right? So I'm not on the 5G hype train. So 5G, like you get lots of speed, you get low latency, that's great. I don't know that I really need that right now. What I need is just like connectivity and covering an entire plant. And 5G doesn't give me that, right? It actually makes that harder because 5G doesn't penetrate into metal and heavily populated areas very well. It can't go through walls, it can't get inside of vessels. And so for me, I need something different. So maybe Wi-Fi 6 that's coming out, that's supposed to be faster than 5G, is going to solve that. I don't know. But connectivity is a big challenge, and I don't see 5G solving any of my connectivity issues there. So we'll see what happens.
So Eric, as you were talking, one of the things that I'm hearing, and I think we share it at Pfizer, is it's very easy to look at these as these are kind of showstoppers to why we shouldn't do innovation. But what I like about the attitude that the team has at Pfizer is we kind of flip that script and go, what's the opportunity? How could we do this? Because what we say to each other all the time is that anything that's really worth doing, that's really good, isn't easy. So finding those opportunities to the point you just mentioned, and starting small, but saying getting a group of individuals or a problem where you know that it resonates, and starting there allows you to have the opportunity to then, build and do more. And I think you have to just acknowledge you're going to have more setbacks than you have successes initially, and don't allow that to deter you. So one of the themes at Pfizer, I don't know how true it is, but they preach it from the steeples, is that we have this kind of dare to try and fail cheaply, fail quickly. In process and kind of in study, it works. And so we try to employ that as well. Is we'd rather fail quickly and realize this isn't going to work and then pivot to what's next, versus this protracted engagement of where we just kind of flounder with something that we just don't really see full success with.
Yep. Persistence, persistence, persistence. And I tell new people that join my team, I was like, you have to become kind of the MacGyver of the oil and gas world. Hopefully you guys know who MacGyver is. I've had a few people join our team that are really young that don't know who MacGyver is, and I feel really old. I'm like, here's a paperclip and a rubber band, build me a tank, right? Figure it out, because you're going to be in the middle of a demo and it's all going to break, and you're going to have to figure out how to make the demo work. So.
Thank you all so much. So keeping within the theme of challenges, this next question's for Brian. So one of the things that's so great about EWTS is that everyone's up here and very willing to kind of share their learnings and their war stories. So I wanted to ask Brian if he had any particular learnings or specific deployments that he wanted to talk about, where he's had quite a few learnings that could be useful for this audience.
I don't know how much time we have, but no, I'm kidding. So I talked a little bit yesterday. You heard we talked about XR and exoskeletons, and probably one of the most recent ones was probably the work that we did with the tanker wiring using augmented reality and the HoloLenses, which produced amazing results. We saw reductions in overall time for the process by well in excess of 30% reductions, and we saw quality increases of over 90% preliminarily. It's pretty incredible, better than I could have expected, to be honest. That being said, when you're a technologist, congratulations, you're a technologist, and also my condolences, because you get to be a protector of and a purveyor of and a protector from exactly the same technologies often. And so a lot of times you end up dealing with folks who have picked a particular technology because it sounds cool, or their friends told them it was neat or some kind of thing, and they don't really understand the total cost of implementation, and they don't really understand the features and functions of it. They know what the slick brochures say. And so in that particular one, we had some folks that didn't really care much for the HoloLens product that we ended up using. I didn't use HoloLens because I'm a big Microsoft fan. I don't get the luxury of being able to be kind of a fanboy of any particular technology. I'm a mechanic, and so I'll use whatever tool makes the most sense. The thing that offered for us on the tanker wiring that was absolutely critical was the ability to absolutely position a digital asset in the real world and to have that persist. Other devices would not provide that, and I had a lot of pushback because we had some folks that really loved other devices, and so they made things unduly difficult in terms of trying to get network access. Which I love what you said something about opportunities. That troubles are.
Right.
They're opportunities in disguise. And so we had an opportunity that was presented to us where we were basically blocked from trying to figure out how to get network access so that we could load the HoloLenses. The interesting thing is, so a couple of problems with that. One is that the models are big, and so we had to figure out how to do a better job of decimating those and to get what was needed for the mechanics to do their work. The second thing was, how do you get that onto the devices in a timely fashion? And so we figured out a really good method for decimating the models and then side-loading them. And interestingly enough, it actually ended up being a benefit in disguise, because now we could go to places that didn't have the infrastructure to support network access, like Ethiopia, for example, and could actually still use the device. So that in trying to kind of block that technology in particular, it ended up making it better. We went back and sharpened our pencil and did a better job. But yeah, and I think that's one of the big things to look at is don't think about these things as negative so much as they're opportunities to figure out a better way. A lot of times it ends up being a better product because of these things. And the other is that sometimes no doesn't mean absolutely no, it means not now. People aren't ready. There's a whole myriad of reasons why a technology might not be ready to be inserted at that point. So, and a third thing that I would really recommend is I joke about, in God we trust, others bring data. And if, I have this secret weapon, it's called a great big bag of money. So I go out and I figure out what the process is going to be, and then I do some quick and dirty pilots to figure out how to prove what I'm talking about. And then when you show up with data and they have none, it makes the situation the conversation changes dramatically.
Yeah.
So.
I agree with Brian that I spent a large chunk of my time just kind of demything the technology that's out there. People come to me and they're like, oh, AI can do this. And it's like, actually it can't, right? 5G is going to do this. It's like, oh, that's not what 5G is, right? But they hear this from marketing spiel, or they see something in an advertisement that's offshore on an oil platform. And they're like, oh, let's get it out to ours. It's like, it can't go out there. Like the marketing shows it out there. Like, I'm sorry that they said that, but it can't go out there. And so I feel like that's a lot of the role that I have to play is like, yes, we want to use this technology, but we need to use it in the right way and for what it's actually capable of versus the marketing spiel that people see.
And I don't know about you folks, but it never works if we lead with the technology. It's got to be leading with what business problem are we solving? And then from there, oh, and by the way, we're going to solve this problem for you by X, Y, and Z, whatever technology it is. That always goes better. If we go in with the technology first, you lose your audience. And to your point, one of the things that we have a new chief digital officer, and she says it repeatedly, data is the oil of the 21st century. But as trite as it can sound, it really is in the sense that whoever has the most data is going to win. And so if you're bringing the data insights that nobody else can bring, or the innovative technology delivers that, then you're on to something that people, no matter what their feeling is about new and innovative technology, you have a position that can't be eroded.
Just put it on the blockchain.
So I'm kind of
It's all
curious,
about
just
blockchain.
kind of to the audience, being a bunch of technologists and folks that actually do things with technology, has anybody noticed that a lot of times folks, it seems like the less they know, the more they make up for it in volume? Has anybody seen that? Show of hands. Yeah, I find a lot of times the folks who are my most adamant, most staunch, adversaries have the least amount of facts and data to back it. So it's just an interesting phenomenon I was reflecting on.
Nathan, you talked about meeting a business need and how to kind of balance that with like the hot new technology. So I imagine all of you sort of kind of have to manage the influx of exciting new technology with projects that meet direct business needs. So how do you sort of balance that going out and seeking and being blue sky and thinking far out with meeting needs that are happening within your businesses immediately?
So I think you try and discern what's fad and what's hype from what actually solves a problem. And is it a long-term problem that you have time to work on and address? And you have an opportunity to explore different options, or is it an immediate issue that you really need to address? And I think that's the first place I start is, what's the real problem we're trying to solve? Is it a problem, or is it a, hey, I'd love to do this because this looks like an interesting technology?
Yeah, so I think probably we'll all relate to this, but one of the things we find is many times we'll go to the business and say, what challenges are you facing? And never once have they said, well, this is my challenge and you're going to solve it with this technology. Many times they know they have a problem, but it's hard for them to even articulate the problem. And so we many times will get this like lump of raw dough that we have to go, well, what is the real problem here? What are they really facing? And then figure out not only that, but also, well, what technologies, solutions, processes, whatever it is that's going to solve it is the right thing to do. So what we've kind of instituted on our team, and it's hard to stick to this, is to carve out some portion of each one of our weeks where we're carving out some hours where it's just for blue sky thinking, to find those innovative technologies that may have nothing to do with pharmaceutical manufacturing, and most of the time our lightning strikes don't come from finding stuff that's in our lane. It's stepping out of our lane and saying, what's out there in general manufacturing that may have some tangential thread back to something that we do? And then where that allows you to kind of compound on the thought processes when we're dealing with those raw lumps of dough of figuring out what is the problem here, what are they really trying to solve? Then you kind of have those lightning strike moments where you go, well, holy whatever, we could try to use this with that, and that could really work. And then from there, you can start to build a business case that solves a problem and uses innovative technology. But the other thing that we always resist is the knee-jerk reaction to go, let's go straight to an innovative technology. Mm-hmm. Many times, that's not the epiphany they need. It's a simple process change, or in some cases, they're using the technology they currently have ineffectively or wrong. And so it's very easy to over-rotate towards, let's solve it with innovation, when sometimes the innovation is saying, you're just not using the technology right you currently have.
Do any of you have an example that you can walk through of one of those lightning strike moments where the solution was actually in something new, exciting, and emerging?
I can go.
Drones. Drones are cool.
I can do one if nobody else has one. So and again, it's not fully baked, but we were trying to solve. We were developing a training proof of concept around the isolators. And so I won't go into what an isolator is for those that don't understand, but effectively you're there inside a sterile room and you're reaching into these glove ports trying to do stuff in a sterile operating line. And so we did our first proof of concept, and we tried to use the technology that was currently available within the VR market. And we put it in front of the end users, and they kind of looked at it and said, well, this is good. It gets us about 25% of the way there, but it isn't enough for us to move from taking folks into the actual room to do the work. We're still going to have to shut down, decommission a line, bring them in because VR doesn't give us enough. And so we had come across two different vendors who were doing things that had nothing really to do with pharmaceuticals, but they were using haptic gloves. And it was, and that was a while ago where we had seen that. And the lightning strike moment was to go, here's an idea. What if we try to retrofit those haptic gloves into some type of VR experience that will allow us to mimic what happens in the isolator? And so we're embarking now upon that journey to test that out. And so I think if we had never been exploring stuff that wasn't directly related to what we were doing, but was kind of out there on the fringe of things, we would have never even had the thought to go. I think we may have just stopped there and said, okay, the VR technology is not at a point where we can solve this use case, and we just would have pivoted to something else. But now we don't need to pivot; we can do another test. So I don't know how it's going to go. We'll know in a couple of weeks whether it's really going to meet the need or not. But it's an exciting opportunity for us to kind of go, here's a lightning strike moment. Let's try something totally different and see if it solves our challenge.
I wanted to go back to your portfolio question that you had before that. So one of the things we do on my team is we kind of have 3 buckets that we put things in. So we have the near term, the midterm, and the long term, right? And so near term are things that we can directly tie to a business problem today, right? So the problems that business actually sees, and then we can try and solve. The midterm are technologies that we know are almost here. Some of them have a business problem tied to them. Some of them we're still looking to see if there is a business problem, but it's a little bit farther out. And then the long term, which is my personal favorite, is just where you get crazy. And it's pretty much 100% pure technology in that bucket because you haven't even thought of the business problem that this is going to solve. But it's where you get to kind of dream, you get to pull stuff from the movies, you get to look at that far left of the Gartner hype cycle and see what they just put on that line. My favorite this year, if anybody saw it, was Internet of Meat. Did anybody see Internet of Meat? So when I first read that, I was like, oh, it's got to be something with like cattle industry. But no, it's humans. And it's sensors under the skin. And I was like, that is amazing. So a few years from now, we're all going to have sensors embedded under our skin. Just wait. We'll all be up here just like blinking, like flashing lights under the skin. So Internet of Meat. So that is my new goal in life, is become the Internet of Meat architect.
So we also go with the 3-bucket model. And because we're at the research center, we get the luxury of more of the future thinking, kind of like academics gone wild, with access to like some domain experts. So sometimes we get the opposite problem of, you might have a question where you think there's nothing to do with technology here. And we end up using, pretty sophisticated technologies. So for example, I have a grant from the Department of Energy, ARPA-E, and they're concerned about energy security for the nation. So there's this phenomenon of we have all this great telecommunications. We have the telephone, we have all these great, you saw all the telepresence and kind of co-presence, collaboration tools. Why is business travel still increasing? Those cases where you're not going for emotional reasons, you're not going to visit your grandma or go for a vacation, but people are just flying to sit down and have no exchange of physical goods, just talk in a meeting and then leave. This is a lot of carbon footprint. How can we reduce that? So the question you would imagine is, what are the motivations behind why people are traveling? This is really, a sociology, a psychology type of question. But what we're actually doing is doing a series of experiments looking at face-to-face communications and then trying to replicate that as much as possible with telecommunications, with the co-presence and the holographic images and so forth. And then throwing all kinds of measures in there, looking at eye tracking, looking at their physiology, looking at their behaviors, to try to kind of extract those underlying motivations, because that's not something that one might be able to articulate. So that's like a counterexample. And we don't have any findings yet. We just started this project. But that's certainly something that we hope will bring up some best practices and findings that we could share with the whole community.
Great, thank you. So I have one last question before we'll open it up to the audience for questions, and that is actually back to Peggy. So I know that your work is really focused on that intersection of kind of the human and the computer. And we talked a little bit about the challenges of kind of taking that user-centered approach to designing solutions when you're looking at new technologies. So how do you kind of maintain that when you generate solutions, and how important do you feel that that really is?
How important do I feel that really is? I think what's more, yeah, like 1,000%. Ultimately, you have to create something that someone's going to use. It's going to help them in, some real way. It's saving their time. It's taking them out of dangerous situations. And you're not going to get that by throwing technologies. I think it has to be a journey with the user to kind of arrive at sometimes the problem definition, sometimes the solution. Anytime that you let the tail wag the dog, you start with a technology, oftentimes you end up changing, the underlying problems definition or the solution. I can't think of any situation where, the solution or the problem kind of was consistent throughout, and that, during that kind of journey to discovering your solution, the problem didn't change. So I would imagine, yes, very, very important user-centered thinking. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have just about 5 minutes left, so I'd like to open it up to the audience for questions for the panelists.
Hi, Cody Beebe, General Dynamics. So the topic of this panel being using other emerging technologies with the wearables that you guys have already deployed, things of that nature. What are you doing to position yourselves to be more acceptive of those things, be it a technical solution, be it a strategy that you need to pose to your leadership? What are you guys doing to make that an easier transition? You don't have to spend the same amount of money spinning up the new technology with the infrastructure you already have. Thank you.
So one of the ways that we solve that problem at Pfizer is we make sure we're very how do I say this? We very forcefully choose and directionally choose the vendors we want to work with, because we want partners that, as the technology evolves, will be able to go down that journey with us. So if we're going to invest in a platform, knowing that as the technology evolves and we want to add more to it, that the platform is expansive enough to be able to handle that, so we're not doing lots and lots of rework. I think the other thing that we very closely, we know this to be true, but we constantly reaffirm it to ourselves, is that the vendors that are creating the technology don't really have any better idea what we really need than we have about what we want the technology to do. And so it's constantly a conversation. If I think about Microsoft and where they went with, where they've gone even with HoloLens 2. They have a host of features in there. I firmly believe that they don't know whether all of those features really are going to add value to every business line. And so then it's up to us as the business to come back to them and say, this is what's most impactful to us. Can you add, augment, enhance your technology to be able to meet the business drivers that our industry faces? And so to me, it's a two-way street. It's making sure that the choices that we make about technology allow us to be as expansive as possible, but then also we're not making those choices with vendors that are also going to grow with us as our needs grow.
I was going to say, just to build on that, so we stay away from proprietary ecosystems. So if you have a vendor solution and you come to me and I have to install beacons that only work with your system, or QR codes that only work for your thing, I'm probably going to rule that out pretty quickly because that doesn't scale and it doesn't help me bring in these other technologies. The second part of that is figuring out what's kind of at that core and figuring out if you can only do that once, right? So if you can set up the data platform for something and then be able to hook 30 things in on top of that, that makes it much easier because I'm not having to do the full stack every single time. So try and take that big problem and break it down into smaller pieces and see what you can only do once.
So I think another element of this, what I would really recommend if you're trying to future-proof your company is, I think, come to the realization that none of us does this stuff because it's not technology for technology's sake. Nobody who bought a drill wanted a drill, they needed a hole. And so what I mean by that is go in and look and work really hard at your processes. Make sure the business processes, frankly put, are what bring the till. It's what gives us the money at the end of the day. The technology facilitates and enables that, right? So really focus hard on streamlining your processes, cleaning them, making them pristine, making sure they're focused on the kind of things that you want to do, and that will help to future-proof your company because the technology is going to churn. If I can guarantee you anything, something is going to change, in terms of technology, if not within the day, tomorrow. So if you focus really hard on what your processes are that you're trying to enable to forward your business, it makes those more plug and playable, and so that you don't have as much disruption when technology does take a hard ride.
Ditto.
I'm Simon with Visual Vocal. So I'm on the software and technology side of this conversation, and my question is, what would you say to software and hardware makers in general to better align with your enterprise goals?
Well, I really appreciate what you said about open standards and things like that. If you're trying to get vendor lockdown because of proprietary things that you're building in, really bad. That's and it's becoming more and more to light. Like that's getting to be the zeitgeist lately. That if you can't play well with others, then you don't belong in the sandbox.
And I appreciate from the vendor side, why you want to do vendor lock-in, right? Sort of repeated business. But from my side and what Brian said, things are going to change out really quickly, and I need to be able to change them out really quickly. So having open platforms with RESTful APIs, like that's really important stuff to me to have. I don't want to have your proprietary database that can't talk to anything else.
Yeah, my answer is simple. Don't assume what I want, just ask. Because I'm more than happy to give you what I want, but sometimes I need to be asked. And I think many times the vendors just assume, well, this will be helpful. Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't.
And don't make us glue your stuff to our stuff. Stovepiping, we're going to have legacy systems. This is another addition to what was said earlier. We can't get away from that. So if it's easier to work your stuff with our stuff, you're more likely to be able to work with us.
And I think one more thing to add is, especially Brian and I sitting here, is don't automatically assume that cloud is okay. It just depends. In Brian's case, the answer may be no to everything. So I think just having that flexibility in your architecture.
Guess we're wrapping up. I'd like to thank the panelists. Thank you so much. This is really informative. I hope the audience found it as well. And thanks so much.